www.videonews.com
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Khaldun Azhari. I'm the president of this club, and I have the honor to welcome you today to attend a very timely event for our speaker, Mr. Antonio Inoki, who is a parliamentary member in the House of Councillors and as an independent. And he just returned from North Korea, conducting his solo diplomacy with that country when everybody is beating the war drums and when the diplomatic solution is put in the shelves or in a very deep freezer. Mr. Inoki visit North Korea. This time is for his 32nd visit, and he has a lot to tell us about this visit, where he met a lot of very important people there. And today's event, by the way, will be for 40 minutes sharp. We will finish at 2:10, and he will have about 10 minutes remarks, and that will be followed by questions and answers. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Mr. Antonio Inoki.
Genki desu ka? Are you energized? If you have energy, you can do anything.
本当に、今大事なのは健康に勝るものなしということで、私もだいぶ年を重ねてきましたので、腰も痛いし首も痛いし、体に、受けた傷、手術、年の数よりもはるかに多いというのが今の現状です。
So, of course, health is one of the most important things. I myself am also becoming older. I have various issues with my back, my neck. I think if I look at the number of injuries or operations I've had, it's probably actually more than my years.
今回また何回目でしょうかね。前回確かあれは、4年前でしょうかね。その前にもしかしたらアリの試合の時も、ここに呼ばれたことがあったのかなと。まあそういうわけで今回またお呼びをいただきましてありがとうございます。
I'm not sure how many times I have been to have the opportunity to speak here before. I think the last time was perhaps around 4 years ago. I think I was actually invited to speak here also on the occasion of my match against Muhammad Ali as well, but I'm very honored to be invited here with you again today.
今回の訪問が32回目ということになります。
This was my 32nd visit to the DPRK, North Korea.
最初に訪問したのが94年。
My first visit was in 1994.
北京に一泊しまして空港へ向かう途中に金日成主席逝去というニュースが流れて、空港で足止めになりました。
And at that time, I spent one night overnight in Beijing, and as I was on my way to the airport, I learned the news of the passing of Kim Il-sung at that time.
で今回はお迎えできませんということで諦めて帰ってきて、その後、2ヶ月後でしょうかね、招待状が来て、最初に北朝鮮を訪問しました。
And so at that time, in fact, actually, I was told that, well, it would not be possible to receive me at such a time. Therefore, I canceled the visit. And then 2 months later, I was invited once again, and I was able to go through with my visit to the DPRK at that time.
今日は時間が短いんで、 なぜ北朝鮮とのつながりがあるかということは、私の師匠、力道山がですね、北朝鮮の出身だと、日本に帰化してましたから、日本人でもあるわけですが、戦後最大のヒーローというか、日本の敗戦という廃墟から国民に立ち上がる勇気を与えてくれた。
And time is limited today, so I would like to just briefly mention why I am connected to the DPRK in the first place. My mentor, my teacher, was the fighter known as Riki Dozan, who was originally from the DPRK. While he was nationalized and did also become a Japanese citizen, he was, of course, one of the greatest heroes of post-war Japan, in the years following the surrender and giving people courage in the rebuilding of the country.
戦後の最大のヒーローだった師匠、力道山が祖国に錦を飾れないという南北が分断してしまって、そういう中で師匠の思いを届けましょうというのが、1990先ほど言った4年ですね、最初に訪問したことから始まります。
And so Riki Dozan was one of the greatest post-war heroes of Japan, but the fact that also he was not able to return to his fatherland or motherland as it was divided, the division of the Korean peninsula was something which was a great issue to him. And so I passed on or took on his will in regards to this. And this is where my connection with the country and what led me to plan this first visit in 1994.
そういうことで、毎年、招待をいただき、またこちらから積極的に行ったこともありますので、本当に、一日も早い、平和ということを願い、来ましたが、逆に時代を重ねるとともにですね、緊張が高まり、一番最悪な核戦争まで起こりうるんではないかという今状況に来ております。
And since that time, I have either been invited to visit or also from myself visited the country every year since then. Of course, I am hoping for the realization of peace as soon as possible. However, as more time is passing, we are seeing only an increase in tensions. Now, the situation has flared to the situation where we may even be facing the possibility of a nuclear war.
ご存知の通り、毎日ニュース、トランプ大統領のニュース、また日本の首脳、安倍総理、あるいはいろんな各分野からの話もありますが、一つには、どちらが先かは別にして拳を上げた、そしたら北朝鮮が拳をそれより高く上げた、それより今度はアメリカが拳を高く上げた、そんな感じで今どちらが拳を高く上げられるかみたいな感じに私には受け取れます。
And of course, as you are aware, we are seeing in the news every day reporting about Mr. Trump, Mr. Abe, and also the DPRK, people from other fields, and so on as well. Regardless of who was the first to raise their fist, we can see the situation where the leaders of both countries are continuing to raise their fists even more. The situation is escalating, and as one raises their fist, this encourages the other, and they are upping each other in this way. Therefore, I believe it is important to look at, well, who is able to be the first to really lower these fists and lower this tension.
日本は唯一の被爆国として長崎、そして広島、長崎ということでですね、本来はこの仲介役に立って、さっき言った拳を半分少しでも下げるような日本の独自の外交をやってもらいたいというのは私の思いです。
And Japan is, of course, the only country who has experienced the atomic bombings of its cities in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Therefore, I hope that Japan could play the role as a mediator in this situation to help to lower these fists half or even a small amount, that Japan could develop its independent diplomacy to play such a role.
皆さん質問があるでしょうから、質問に入った方がいいと思いますので、限られた時間でですね、何でも結構です。聞いていただければ率直にお答えをさせていただきます。
I am sure that you have many questions, so with the limited time we have, I will end my remarks here and open up for questions. Please feel free to ask me on any topic you would like, and I will answer frankly.
一つは挨拶が長くなりますと、あいつは年を取った証拠だと言われますので。
Of course, if the initial greetings become longer, it becomes really a proof of someone becoming more and more aged.
どうぞ質問されてください。
So please feel free to open up for your questions now.
これが立ってきますよ。大丈夫？
Thank you very much for the presentation. We'd like to open the floor. Your questions, please ask one very small question. Lisa and Anthony, yes. And Anthony.
Linda Sieg from Reuters, thank you very much for being here today. I know you said that this was your 32nd visit to North Korea, and I wonder if you could tell us what you think you've achieved through those visits. And in that connection, you said you thought that Japan could have an independent role to play in reducing the tensions. Do you think, for example, that Prime Minister Abe should make a visit to North Korea? Is that something that would help? And a very small question, I'm sorry to ask, why do you wear always a red muffler? Thank you.
まずじゃあ最後のから、昔、プロレスラーだったんでリングにガウンを着ると下にこうタオルを巻いてたんです。赤いタオル。引退した後ファンから、やっぱり赤いあれが似合いますからってタオルを送ってきたんですが、タオルじゃさすがに街歩けないんで、この、マフラーというのかストールというのか国会でもこれ議論になりましたけど、そこでそういう形でやっております。で先ほど言われた、今までの成果というか、やはり人の流れを切らない、どんな状況であろうとドアを閉めないという私の基本的な考え方です。
So I will answer your last question first. I was, of course, a professional wrestler, and whenever I would enter the ring, I would have the red towel around my neck. After retiring from the world of wrestling, my fans still continue to send me these red towels, saying, well, this suits you very much, you should continue this. However, of course, when I became a politician, we thought that maybe rather than towels, a scarf may be more appropriate. This was actually something that entered a little bit of debate at the Diet initially. However, I have continued to wear this red scarf as my trademark since then. In regards to achievements of my visits to the DPRK, I think that the most important point is to ensure not cutting off the flow of people or exchange throughout all of this time. It's important to make sure that we keep the door open.
一つにはスポーツ文化交流は、誰も指定する人は少ないと思いますのでね、その私の場合はスポーツ交流を通じて世界平和というのが、89年に政治の場に出た時の、スローガンでした。
And I believe that there are very few people who would deny the possibilities of sports and cultural exchange. Therefore, in my own personal capacity, actually ever since entering the political world in 1989, I have continued to work towards promoting world peace through sports exchange.
それでいいですかね、お答えは。
Does that answer your question?
先日小泉総理が元総理が行かれるという新聞ニュースになりましたが、非常にこれは壁が高いと思います、安倍総理が。平壌宣言があって、その後に制裁をかけられたという、その辺の誤解というよりも、流れがありますので、大変にもっと違う方が、もし行くチャンスがあれば、その前段の交渉をされることが大事だと思いますね。
In regards to your question about Prime Minister Abe visiting the DPRK, I believe that former Prime Minister Koizumi also made some remarks in regards to this in the newspaper lately. But there would be very high obstacles in place for Prime Minister Abe to make such a visit. This would be quite difficult. Of course, we can look back, and there was the Pyongyang Declaration between the two countries. There were the sanctions which were implemented after this. There are the various flow of events which has happened in this time. Therefore, I believe that if there were a chance to have a delegation go to the DPRK, perhaps to start with other individuals from the party and to set the initial talks or preparations towards a later visit may be the good way to go.
Andy Sharp from Bloomberg. Two questions. First, a follow-up to Linda's there. You mentioned about the possibility of a delegation from the LDP going to North Korea. Is there some kind of plan in place at the moment? Are people actually considering this or planning a visit? And my second question is, when you were in Pyongyang recently, could you just explain to us all who you met and give us some indication of their thinking about the current crisis and how North Korea wants to proceed?
やっぱり政権与党という、自民党の、決定というのが一番大きいわけですね。その中で、今、空気が変わりつつある、今までは制裁ということが一辺倒であったのが、対話も必要だと、先日の朝日新聞にも、50何%ですかね、対話が大事だという、圧力がまだ40何%という記事がありました。そういう中で自民党の中にいろいろ対話をしたいという考え方を持つ人がいまして、そういう仲間というか、増えてきているということ、風が変わってきたと、多分表と裏が政治はありますから、皆さんが願っていることは戦争はとんでもない、同時にやはりその風が今ちょっと変わりつつある、日本はみんなで渡れば怖くないという言葉がありますが、本当に一つの流れができると全部そっちへ目が向いてしまう、そういう反省から言えば、第二次大戦もしかりだと思います。そういう中で今違う風をちょっと方向を変えてみる、そういう空気が今助成されていると思います。
Regarding your question about the LDP or the governing party, of course, their decision and what decision they make will be the key there. But I believe it could be said that there is a change in atmosphere or environment happening at the moment. Until now, there has been very much a voice only calling for sanctions. However, I believe that there are more and more voices looking into the possibility of dialogue or the necessity of dialogue. We also saw the poll in the Asahi Shimbun recently, which said that 50-something% of people were for dialogue. Well, there was still a number of 40-something for pressure. However, I believe that even within the Liberal Democratic Party, there are more voices or more people who are seeking dialogue. I believe that more people who are sharing this opinion with me are increasing, and there is a small but steady wind change happening now as well. Of course, in politics, there is what's happening on the surface and what is happening below or behind the surface as well. However, the common hope that everybody is hoping that there will not be a war is something which is shared. So I believe that little by little there is a change in the wind. Of course, in Japan, there is a sort of saying where if everybody goes together, then it will be okay, then it's not so fearful. Therefore, I think that as these voices or this atmosphere can change little by little, this can also make an impact in an overall change of direction. This idea of everybody moving together is, of course, also connected to some of the regrets in regards to past actions of Japan or looking at World War II as well. But I believe this is a current situation that we have.
一つにはぶれないという言葉、先ほどどういうふうに英語で訳されますかという質問もしてたんですけど、今日言ったこと、昨日言ったこと、今日は違う、今日言ったこと、明日は違う、そういうのが各国のリーダーが発言されていることを見ましてね、要するに人生はプリンシプルという一つの背骨じゃありませんが、きちっとした基本的な考え方、生き方、これは今、戦後本当に忘れ去られたわけではないと思いますが、それをしっかりと、人生はどうあるべきかという部分で、基本的なそういうものを持たなきゃいけない、政治の世界がまさにそれを示してもらいたいと思っています。
There is a word in Japanese, burenai, which means unshaking or holding your resolve. And we discussed previously about the best English translation for this. However, looking at the idea of many world leaders or politicians may say a different thing, yesterday, today, tomorrow, changing their statements, changing their principles or the way they are saying. However, I believe it's very important to really maintain strong principles, fundamental ways of thinking and ways of living within one's life as well. This has to some extent perhaps been a little bit forgotten in recent years, post-war years, but I think this is important to revisit and think about how one should live and have these unshaking or resolved principles. And this is something which I hope that politicians can also very much demonstrate.
So my question was about who met in North Korea and the North Korean leadership's thinking about the crisis.
北朝鮮とお会いされて、北朝鮮側の政治家、そして彼らの発言。
写真ありました。
こちらがそうですね。
これがそうか。
そうですね。
はいはい、なんだ。この方が党の、副委員長、リ・スヨン。
So first of all, I met with Mr. Lee Soo-young, the vice chairman of the Central Committee of the Korean Workers' Party.
外交の今トップであります。
He is the top diplomat of North Korea.
政治の仕組みというのが、労働党が一番上にありますので、労働党の幹部、そして政治という形になりますので、この方が外交では全部権限を持たれております。
Within the political system of the DPRK, the Korean Workers' Party plays a central role and their central committee. So he is the vice chairman of this central committee. He is also the president of their international relations department, meaning he is the overall person responsible for diplomacy and international relations of the country.
この方が労働党常任委員会の委員長ですね、キム・ヨンナム。
And this is Mr. Kim Yong-nam, the president of the Presidium of the Supreme People's Assembly of the DPRK.
必ずパーティーの席上でですが、会談もしたこともありますが、非常に私のことをよく理解していただいたというよりは、この難しい時期によく来られましたねという、いつも歓迎の意をいただき、ご存知の通り、にこやかな顔で迎えてもらっています。
This was the meeting which happened with Mr. Kim Yong-nam was at a reception or a party. However, we have had occasion to meet before, so we can see that even in this very difficult time, also responding to me, as you can see here, with this very smiling or friendly atmosphere, he understands very well my history and what we have been working towards.
パク・ヨンスク軍、なんだろうな、これ正式には人民武力省というのがありますが、それの大将ですね。
And this is Mr. Park Yong-sik, who is a general. He is also the Minister of the People's Armed Forces, so the representative of the Ministry of the People's Armed Forces of DPRK.
他にもいろんな方お会いしましたが、本当に膝を突き合わせて、握手をして、その感じっていうのは、本当に友好的であるかどうかっていうのは分かりますね。だからいや、よく来ましたねって終わるんじゃなくて、そこからまた話が始まるんで、大変時間が長くなってしまったりすることもあります。
So these are some of the key figures with whom I met. Of course, there were many other people with whom I met or exchanged during my time in the DPRK. But in these exchanges, of course, you can tell when you shake someone's hand, really the atmosphere or what they are thinking as well. You can sense the friendliness there. And rather than ending just with one word of greeting and so on, the conversation would continue from there as well with more time and so on. So it's to really demonstrate the atmosphere of the situation.
Anthony and Stefano and Benjo.
Anthony Rowley, Singapore Business Times. Have you actually come back to Tokyo bearing an invitation to Mr. Abe or to some other senior official of the LDP to visit Pyongyang? And secondly... No. Okay. Secondly, a number of years ago, President Putin of Russia decided that everyone was talking about North Korea, but no one was talking to North Korea. So he picked up the phone and he called Kim Jong-il and said, "Can I come and talk to you?" And Kim Jong-il apparently said, "Yes, please come next week," which he did. And after that, things began to become, the tensions began to be diffused. Do you think North Korea would be open to such an invitation now if another leader, such as Mr. Abe, were to asked to go and talk to them, whether they'd be open to discussions?
先ほどちょっと出ましたが、訪朝団という、議員団の、ある方も、代表団という提案もさせてもらいましたが、そこはまだちょっと時間的に、それで、議員団の訪朝団を迎えてくれますかという話をしたら、喜んでお迎えしましょうと。で、一つにはこれはアジアというか、あるいは北朝鮮、韓国も含めての儒教の世界の精神であったり、そういう意味では必ず一つのお土産を持って、お土産ってものじゃないんで、そういうお国のあれがあると思いますので、最後に東レの会をやったときに、ぜひぜひ提案されたことを前向きに考えましょう。そしてその訪朝団に関しては受け入れるし、我々は了承しましたということ。
One aspect which I proposed to the DPRK during my visit this time was to send a delegation of parliament members from Japan, namely from the LDP. This was something which would seem to require some time and so on. However, I did make this proposal and was told from the DPRK side that they would be happy to receive such a delegation. Of course, this is not only the DPRK, but also South Korea and within Asia as well, countries which are based on Confucian values. There is the concept or the tradition of the omiyage, or something reciprocal, not a material gift as such, but being able to take something home or have something reciprocal between you. At the final part of my visit, there was a meeting known as sort of a reciprocal visit within this as well, and within that meeting, I was told that they would be positive of the suggestion of a delegation of LDP Diet members to come to the DPRK and would be willing to accept such a delegation.
Thank you. My name is Stefano Carrer. I am an Italian journalist. There is another Antonio that is a member of the Italian Parliament that goes to North Korea and meeting with top members of the regime and try to promote the dialogue. His name is Antonio Razzi. And is considered quite weird, actually, because, including his last name, because in Italian, Razzi means rockets, so this is Antonio Rockets dealing with North Korea. I wonder if you ever met him or heard of him, and do you think that solo diplomacy from a single member of parliaments, foreign parliaments, could be useful, not only from you, I mean, and could make a difference? Thanks.
私はかつて1976年ですね、モハメド・アリと知り合いしたおかげで世界中に私のアントニオという名前が知れました。そういう関係で、政治の場に出た時も、非常に馴染みやすいというか、普通はやはり国と国の関係であったり外交はその点は独自外交ということで、基本的にはスポーツ外交ということで、いろんな偉い方と会見することもありました。最初にお会いしたのがフィデロ・カストロさんで89年ですかね。そういう関係で、そのロケットのアントニオさんは知りませんが、一つにはやはり先ほども言ったように交流という、それはある意味では今大事な部分は議員外交も大事だと、当然総理が行かれて話をする、これは最高のあれでしょうけど、同時に我々がバッジをはめさせている以上はそういう二重外交というすぐ批判が出ますが、そうではなく、国をちゃんと理解した上で、我々の立場という部分でそういう外交は必要だと思っています。
I think that my name, of course, Antonio, is very well known, particularly since the 1976 match with Muhammad Ali. Since then, I think people know of me, and also the name Antonio is perhaps very easy to remember. In that sense, I do have a role to play as individual diplomacy in this sense as well, and sports can play a very significant role in this as well. My first such act was to meet with Fidel Castro, actually, in an act of sports diplomacy or individual diplomacy in 1999. However, in regards to Antonio Rocket, I am not aware of him. I do not know of him. But when we look at the situation or the necessity of exchange, I believe it's also very important to have exchange on the level of parliamentarians as well. Of course, it would be optimal to have such exchange on the prime ministerial level. However, I believe that there is much that we as parliamentarians, as Diet members, can do with our position, our status as well. Often there are criticisms that this is a kind of double diplomacy. However, I believe that this is not the case. We are acting in full understanding of our country's position, our government's position, but using our status or our position as Diet members to contribute in a way.
Thank you, Jimbo. I would like to make an announcement that these photos will be available for anybody who would like to take them. Please contact Chong Sang at our press club, and you will get copies through Mr. Inoki's office. So the copyright is available for everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Terry Jimbo with the BD News. I'm going to ask questions in Japanese. 日本語で質問いたします。先ほど、リー・スヨンさんとかキム・ヨンナムさんお会いされた方々の名前出ましたけども、議員が実際にそういう方々とお会いしてですね、特に日本に対して、どういうような、お話があったのか あるいは議員の方でどのような感触を得たのか、特にですね、今回のこのミサイル核危機というのは、アメリカにとってはですね、アメリカまで届くようなミサイルができるかできないかの瀬戸際で、アメリカが非常にそれを深刻に考えているっていうのは分かるんですが、日本はもともとミサイルのレンジに入っているわけでして、今、日本と北朝鮮の間でどういうことが起きていて、日本の政府の反応、対応を北朝鮮側はどういうふうに見ているのか、評価しているのか、議員がお話しした方々からの反応で、もしそういうのがあればお願いいたします。
I would like to ask a question in Japanese. You mentioned about meeting with Kim Yong-nam or Lee Soo-young. I would like to ask about the contents of what you discussed at these meetings, particularly in regards to Japan. What was discussed with them? What kind of impressions you had from these meetings as well? Of course, we have both the missile and the nuclear crisis in recent years. In the United States, there is much discussion about whether they have the capacity, the capability to reach the United States or not. However, in the case of Japan, the missile range was already, in reach of Japan already. So I would like to ask if you had any discussion in regards to the DPRK's representatives' views of the response or attitude of the Japanese government, how they are viewing this or evaluating this.
かつて私はイラクの人質解放を1990年ですかね、その時に、ウダイ・フセイン、あるいはラマダン副首相、そういう方と会談をするときに30分、40分ずっとストーリーを聞かなきゃいけないんですね。なぜここだと。でそういう経験の上でですね、北朝鮮も同じように、最初はそういう話を、30分黙って聞いてなきゃいけないんですけど、そういうある意味大事ではありますけど、こちらも勉強していってます。そういう中でもうそういう話を抜きにして本音の話をしましょうよということで、向こうの形の会談をしております。それでたまには私の場合はまず酒を飲んだときに、ロシア外交をやったときに、ウォッカでロシア人をぶっ飛ばしたのは私だけだろうと、佐藤勝君が書いてますけどね、そういう意味では、やはり政治家、あるいは外交は体力も必要だよ、そういうことでですね、正確な答えになったんですかね。
So if I look at my own experience of, for example, the time when I went to Iraq to help to negotiate for resolution of the crisis of the Japanese hostages taken in Iraq at the time in 1999, I met with Mr. Hussein and Mr. Ramadan at that time as well. And from that experience, I know that in these such meetings, the first 30 or 40 minutes or so, you have to listen to the story, to the statements of the other side. And the same case was for the DPRK as well. For the first 30 minutes of an official meeting, you have this time to listen to what they have to say for themselves. And of course, that is important in a sense, but from my own experience, I have experience or have learned about the situation and their stance before going as well. So what I share is that, well, this is one aspect which is important, but more than that, it's important for us, can we speak frankly, can we speak directly to each other, beyond this statements as such. And I think that one important time that this happens is when you have a chance to have a drink together. I believe it was Mr. Sato Masaru who said that I'm probably the only person who's overthrown Russians with vodka, but actually I think that it's very important to look at how you can have these kind of frank discussions with people, go beyond the official statements and so on. Therefore, for politics and diplomacy, really being able to have the stamina to continue with such discussions is very important. I'm not sure if this responds fully to your question.
エミノブヒロ from Bloomberg。日本語で失礼します。2つあるんですが、まず1つ目、今回32回目の訪朝ということでしたが、今厳しい状況であるというお話もありましたけど、これまでの訪朝と特別違ったところがあったかどうか、もしあったとすればそれはどんな行動だったり、猪木議員とお話しされている内容で何か感じられたことはありますか。
I have two questions from Bloomberg. My first question is, you mentioned this is your 32nd visit to the DPRK. I would like to ask, of course, it is a very difficult or tense situation at the moment, but whether you observed any particular differences to your previous visits as well, whether in actions, contents of discussion, and so on.
政治的には先ほどプリンシプルという話で、言ってることはずっと毎回同じ形の話です。ただ一つやはりメディアが欲しがるいろんな写真、街並みが行くたんびに変わっている。今回70階建てのビルも完成して、本当に街並みはあるいはそこにいる人たちのファッションもそうなんですね。 私の同行している人間がその辺は詳しいんであれなんですけど、要するに2、3年前は日傘が多かったんです。いろんな綺麗なで、今年はそういう馬車が結構流行ってて、動物園にも案内されましたが、馬車に乗ってるような場面、その辺が政治的な突っ張り合いの話と同時に国民感情がどういうふうに変わってきてるか、多分根底にはいろんなこれから経済という部分に目を向けてる人たちも増えています。
In regards to politics, well, I believe, as I mentioned before, having the same unshaking principles is key. However, one aspect which I do believe could be said has changed, and this is something which, of course, the media is also always keen to have photographs and so on, is the cityscape or the city scenes of Pyongyang. We can see now 70-story buildings being built in the city, and also people's fashions and tendencies and so on have changed as well. Those accompanying me or traveling with me know a lot more about fashion. However, a few years ago, for example, we saw many people having very fashionable sun parasols or sun umbrellas and so on, but we can see various changes in people's fashion, what they're holding, what they're having, and so on as well. This is showing, I think, changes in people's daily lives or attitudes and so on. So those people who are paying attention to economy or economic issues may see various changes in regards to this. It is perhaps somewhat different to the political situation, however.
じゃあもう一つすみません。先ほど自民党の中の空気も少し変わってきたというようなお話があったかと思うんですが、具体的に言うとどのぐらいの方々がその対話の方向に少し変わってきたかなというところと、もしその訪朝団組まれるとしたらどのぐらいの人数になるのかなというところはいかがでしょうか。でもしその対話というのは日本政府はその核兵器を保有することを認められないというスタンスではありますけど、そのあたりその対話に持っていく場合に核兵器の保有を認めるかというのはどうでしょう。
My second question I would like to ask you mentioned about the changes in the atmosphere within the LDP which you are observing. I would like to ask you to speak a little more concretely to this. On what level do you see these changes happening, changes in terms of people being more open to seeking dialogue? For example, if a delegation were to be or to go to the DPRK, how many people would you envisage taking part in such a delegation? Also, when we look at the issue of dialogue, of course, the Japanese government is currently of the position that it will not recognize the nuclear weapons status of the DPRK. However, if the country is going to be open to dialogue or to go into negotiations, what is your position or your suggestion in regards to the Japanese government's position on recognizing the DPRK as a nuclear weapons state?
私の場合はこういうキャラクターですから別にどこから叩かれようが何も問題ないんですが、例えば名前を出してしまうと、そういう、政界の中でのいろいろあれもあると思うので、ちょっとそこは差し控えてさせてもらいたいと思います。で逆にもう一つ私が質問させていただきたいのは、日本の不倫問題はどういうふうに今お考えですか、女性の立場から。
Of course, I am of this kind of character, so I don't care if anybody criticizes me. However, considering the reality of the world of politics, I would like to refrain from giving any concrete names of potential or politicians who may be involved in such a delegation. And actually, I would like to ask a question of you, if I may. There is, of course, the issue of the many affairs of female politicians in Japan at the moment. What is your position, or what is your way of thinking about this issue of the affairs within Japanese politics as a woman?
Thank you. Yes, Fujita-san. Please, short question because we are running out of time.
フリーランスの藤田と申します。夕刊富士、と関係をしておりますが、イ・スンヨンさんがですね、アメリカの核に守られた韓国、日本の脅威があるからというようなことを言ってたのをテレビで報道見ましたが、逆にそれに対してですね、いやそうじゃないと、あんたがそんなことするからですね、日本も韓国も核武装なんて議論が出てくるんだというような、なんか猪木さんの方からですね、カウンターをこう出したとかですね、いった内容が聞ければですね、大変ありがたいんですが。
Freelance. My name is Fujita. I would like to ask, in regards to your meeting with Mr. Ri Soo-young, I saw on the Japanese television reports that there was a comment from Mr. Ri about, well, there is the threat from Japan and the Republic of Korea in regards to, as they are, protected by the U.S. nuclear umbrella and so on. However, I would like to ask if you made any counter remarks to such statements from the DPRK side, saying, well, it's because you are having such acts, you are doing such acts that Japan and Korea are considering nuclear armament themselves or are in this kind of situation. I would like to ask your response or what kind of comments you made to the DPRK.
時間がないんで、 なんでそんな遠く行っちゃった？俺殴られると思ったんですか？
Sorry, why have you gone so far away? Were you here? Were you perhaps going to come up and punch me?
まあそうですね。ただやはり相手のその状況っていうのも見極めながら外交やっていかなきゃいけない。決して北朝鮮に対する片棒を担ぐというすぐそういう言い方をする人もあると思いますが、相手が何を考えているかということを聞くことも一番大事なんです。で、当然これからまた次にレベルあった話し合いになっていけばそういう話が出てくると思います。
Of course, I believe that really it's very important to understand the situation of the other party, to understand what their position is, what they are thinking. We need to pay attention to this. Of course, there may be criticism saying that I am taking the side of the DPRK, but this is not the case. Rather, I believe that the most important thing is to listen to what they have to say. And if this kind of thing can be done and this is brought to a higher level, then there can be some kind of progress made.
Okay, I think we ran out of time, but I will just ask one comment. As a wrestler, what do you give politicians? What advice do you give diplomats, politicians to solve such a big crisis? As a wrestler, what can they learn from wrestling, basically?
先ほども申し上げた通り、やはり信念というか、ぶれないというか、やはり我々は不安がいるんで、その不安に対して生き様というか、だから猪木が信頼できる、猪木をあれ出す、そういう今のレスラーたちが、あるいは他の他のスポーツ選手も引退をしてまたすぐにやり残したことがあるからってんでカムバックをしてくる。でも現役っていうのは最高の状態、それが持続できないから引退する。それが何ですかね、それぞれの生き方があるから、否定はしませんけど、そこは私が一番大事にしたいと思います。
I think that the most important point is, as I mentioned before, maintaining unshaking principles, keeping resolve in this sense. Of course, there are many different uneasy things or uncertain things within this world, but keeping this resolve is something which I think is the reason why people are able to entrust me or put their trust in me. And I think if we look at wrestlers or athletes, of course, when they are still active, they are at their peak condition as well. Many retire after that, have comebacks and so on, but really looking at in their peak condition what they can do to keep this unshaking principles is key.
今若い政治家が多いですから、やはりこれからもっともっといろんな経験を積んで、命を懸けますという選挙中に必ず言うと思いますが、本当に命を懸けるということがどういうことかという、そういうようなやはり国家国民のために命を懸けられるようなやはり心を持った政治家に若い人たちが早く育ってほしい。我々はその背中を見てもらえばいいと思っています。
And there are many young politicians today in Japan, so I hope that they are able to gain more experience. When we look at the times of election campaigns, for example, people always say, I will put my whole life into this. However, we need to look at really if they are making or fulfilling this at the times outside of the elections as well, really putting everything on the line, putting everything forward for the people, for the citizens, and also being sincere in what they're doing as well. I hope this is the kind of young politicians that we are able to nurture, and I hope that they will be able to learn from us as their elders as well.
Thank you very much. This wraps up our event, and I would like to give you 1 year honorary membership to our club. Please come next time and tell us more about your trips to North Korea. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You may sit and tell our guests.